All right, guys. Andre Chin here again with the Real Estate Hustle podcast. Today we've got a special guest and a really great friend of mine, Kelly Maniteas. We're going to be talking about all things real estate, building teams, being a solo agent, how to build a big business. Kelly has literally seen it all, and I'm excited to hear what's going to come out of her today. Kelly, tell us a bit more about yourself, your journey, and how we got to today.
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's an absolute honor. And about myself, well, I am the CEO and founder of Integrative Coaching Solutions. I have been in real estate now just over 20 years and pretty much have done every single position, which, in some cases was fun, in other cases not so much. And yet, totally adds to the journey where I am now. Because with that experience, I've been able to connect a lot of dots in real estate and see a lot of the gaps that show up generally. And now I get to spend day in and day out in those conversations, and it's been an absolute blast.
That's amazing. Integrative coaching solutions. I'm going to let you do the plug there. I mean, I love your coaching company. I know you coach a lot of agents across Canada as well and the US. Tell me a bit more about integrative coaching.
Yeah, I would love to. So Integrative Coaching Solutions really came out of a need. I was consistently being asked questions around challenges in real estate, and I've always been a natural coach. And it just got to the point where it made sense to form a company around it. And we have the honor and pleasure of working with so many amazing real estate agents across Canada and the US. And we coach in a lot of different aspects. We coach in leadership, emotional intelligence. We also coach in business building, in hiring, and in some cases also on the personal side, because you can't have business without it impacting your personal and vice versa. So we aim to be in the space that the client needs us to be. There is no limit in the area that we can support you in.
Wow, and that's pretty incredible. I mean, and knowing the need and how long it took you to set everything up. Let me ask a real estate question around that. I mean, we're built on the MREA, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. Is your coaching company by any chance built on any of the systems and models that you would have learned through there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the MREA is not a real estate book, it's a business book. And almost every conversation we have brings in an aspect from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent because it's built on such amazing proven models. And it's also the reason why we coach outside of real estate too. So we have a ton of industries that we have those same conversations with.
That's incredible. I'll never forget being in Gary Keller in Austin, and I was at a course, I believe it was called How to Build an Empire. And I sat in the room and there was about 200 people, non-real estate people. I was one of 3 realtors in the room. And we had over 200 other business owners that were studying the MREA and building other outside businesses based on that. So I'm not surprised to hear that. What does that structure look like for you in sort of your world? Are you running an operations director? Are you like what does the overall structure look like, and how can that relate to someone who's thinking about building a team?
Well, I mean, we follow the exact process that we learn in that book, right? So, when I first started, obviously I was a solopreneur. It was just me. And I immediately built a business plan to identify what my future organizational chart would look like, what my budget needed to be, when I was going to be bringing in specialists into the organization, when the revenue made sense, right? Because we do the red light, green light. We've got to make sure that we're following the plan. So yeah, I have an operations director that takes care of the operations side of the business, which allows me to focus in my strength zone. And we also are building our coaching team as well, because yes, we can all coach in every space, and yet we also come with strengths in certain spaces. So just like the MREA, where you're building out specialists, right? As your organization grows, you build your operations first, then you bring in on the sales side, the assistants and specialists there. Same thing with coaches. So now we're building specialists in the coaching space the same way as the MREA teaches us. And we do that because we know the model works. And it makes sense and ensures we stay in an amazing profitable position, not only for the organization, but also for the people that are joining us on the team.
Incredible. I love hearing that. Now you're coaching top hustlers and top agents across North America. What are you hearing right now? I mean, global pandemic, we've been shut down. I'm hearing best year of my life, worst year of my life, everything in between. I mean, what are you getting out there being on the other side? Because I mean, you're going to get information that I'm just not going to hear sometimes because they're going to trust you in a totally different way. So what's happening out there?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of different conversations happening right now, depending on where the client is, right? And just like you said, some are having their best year ever, right? They were in an amazing position to pivot when this happened, and some were not, right? And they are in a struggling type position. At least that's what they're labeling it as. And the conversation is really getting back to basics. What are the cracks in the foundation that showed up during this that we can shore up on? Those three questions: what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we do more of that we're already doing? So we're, re-looking at the foundation that was in place and ensuring that if cracks showed up, do we fill them or do we build an addition? And for the ones that are having amazing years this year, it's really about how do we capitalize on that? What did we learn through this process, that solidified what we do really well and also showed what we could be doing better, and things that we didn't think would add value to the organization all of a sudden are one of the main pillars in the organization. And how do we continue that trend? But at the end of the day, a lot of it, Andre, comes down to leadership and communication. It's always going to be the foundational thread.
So tell me more about that leadership piece, right? I mean, I'm a new agent, a seasoned agent. I'm having my year, whether good, bad, or in between, and I'm hearing about, filling cracks in my business. What are some things I should be looking for? What would you coach me to if I came to you right now and said, Kelly, I'm having my best year ever, but I'm just not sure where to head next? What would that conversation look like?
Well, I think it's first starting with the individual. I mean, questions generally show up because there's a lack of clarity in their own thinking. So I'm always going to dig into the individual first and see what is the level of the thinking, what are the limiting beliefs that are showing up, where is the lack of clarity showing up in the business, whether it's with themselves or with their current team, right? Because as we learn, especially from the Shift book, right? Effective people leverage. Well, this was a great moment to practice that. So I'm going to start with them first to really see what their filter and perspective is of their current situation. And then we're going to look at, what is it that they feel needs to shift or is lacking in their world or needs an alignment back to where they were. And build a plan on that. I mean, sometimes the cracks show up as people, sometimes the crack shows up as systems, and sometimes the crack shows up in our own leadership skill set.
Okay. So if I'm looking to build an organization, I'm looking to build a team, what are you seeing amongst all your leaderships that you're coaching? What's something that, I need to check in with myself to make sure that I have? Like, is there we always, as we've been going through these interviews and we've been talking to great agents across the nation, I'm hearing there's no secret pill, but there's got to be something that I can look to and say, okay, if I do this, I will have some success. Like, what would you be telling me right now as a new agent or even someone who's seasoned and looking to build and grow?
Well, I think first and foremost, we've got to check with ourselves to see if we're living a life on perceived values or actual values.
What do you mean by
that? I think a lot of us have this concept of values that we think we hold to the highest regard. And yet, if we really dug into how we spend our time, what we actually follow through on, what we allow to slip through the cracks, I think we'll notice that, the value that we might say is a definite, line breaker, it actually isn't. So that's what I mean by a perceived value. because your
Okay.
values are shown in the actions and commitments you follow through on.
Okay. Give me
Right?
an example. Give me an example of where you'd see that show up as like a perceived sort of value, and then you're going to obviously break through that. And
Yeah. So one of our clients, I'll just say client A, had
okay.
a perceived value of integrity. And integrity to this client meant that you show up on time, right? You show up prepared, and you follow through on your commitments. That was their meaning of that word.
Right.
And during this process or environment that we find ourselves in, the client was not actually showing up that way to the coaching sessions.
Okay.
And he had no awareness of how the two things were connected with each other. And how can you hold a team member to a value that you have created the meaning to if you don't actually follow through on the value yourself?
Just was showing up sort of in every area of his life, I would imagine.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Huh. I
Absolutely.
remember I remember a similar conversation we had once upon a time sitting in Austin, Texas over tacos, that I had to go through that uncomfortable pain with you of learning about my values and what I was going to accept and not accept.
Hmm.
That was fun. However, I mean, it did get me on this path, right? I mean, I was sort of struggling and not entirely sure where to go, what to look at next. We had our team, but we were a bit of a mess, and you kind of got real and got right with me, and really put me in my place. So to this day, I'm still very grateful for that conversation. We talk about those pivotal moments that you have, and where things show up, and I'm sure you've got a few of your own. If you feel like sharing, feel free. But that was one of those moments that I can look back on it and go, and I get asked that a lot, like, what changed, right? And I think you had sort of said, A, get systematized, trust the people around me, and then B, kind of get out of my own way. And well, here we are today. So what sort of pivotal moments have you had through your 20-year journey? I mean, you've done it all, and I know that, and now you're in the coaching space of things, but what are some of those moments for you?
Oh my goodness, how do I just pick one?
You can share as many as you'd like. I mean, we've got lots of time.
Well, I mean, for myself, and if you're like me, generally those pivotal moments show up when you find yourself in a conversation with someone that's willing to push the limit of your thinking, right? That's willing to question you, not just accept you. And over the course of 20 years, I've had a lot of people around me like that. And one specifically, I would say, was with my coach at the time, Mike Bastian. He was my coach when I first entered the Keller Williams system, and continued to be my coach when I became a MAPS coach. He was my head coach. And there was a point in time where, he really questioned me on who I was, you
Wow.
know, yeah, because through life, and we hear it a lot, the term the imposter syndrome, where, you feel like you need to be a certain way based on the environment you find yourself in. And
Right.
I had very much built a life like that, to the point where I had almost lost my own identity, and I didn't realize it. And he asked me that question, and I honestly, at the moment, I couldn't really answer him. I was more thinking about, what does he need to hear from me right now, versus digging into my own persona and talking about my own identity. And that moment completely shifted everything for me, and caused me to really look back at my life and see, who am I as a person, and the version that I've created, is that the one I want to move forward with?
Wow.
It was a massive one.
That's deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so, Kel, we got 20 years of you doing everything in real estate. Like, you were on the sales side, I mean, in the office side, coaching, leadership, and everything in between. Share that journey with me. I mean, how did you, and why did you settle on the coaching side of things? How did that come to be?
Ah, yes. Well, I mean, when I first started real estate, it was funny. It was through a relationship. Um, Someone just randomly called me up and said, there's this opening here for answering phones. at a real estate office. Did you want it? And for me, I was like, yeah, sure, why not? That's something to do. Why not? Let's just jump into it. And never thought that it would be something I stayed in.
Right.
But I fell in love with real estate. And I had the opportunity to come into an organization that had many facets of real estate in it. It wasn't just residential sales. They were also doing development. They were also doing property management. You know, along the route, we opened up insurance and mortgage, right? So there were so many opportunities to learn. And for me, I am a lifelong learner. If I'm given an opportunity to dig into something else that A, will increase my value to an organization, and then also allow to take that and add value to somebody else, I'm all over it. So I think that's why I went in all of the areas of real estate, because I wanted to see, if I'm on the operations side, how does my operations impact an agent? And why do they
Right.
have these consistent complaints, right? So I did that purposely so that I could see the industry as a whole. And through that process, because I was gathering all that information, it just naturally became that person, like I said before, where people would ask me questions. And I started noticing that I really loved being in those conversations. And when I joined Keller Williams and had an opportunity given to me to say, hey, have you ever thought about coaching? I was like, yeah, absolutely. I would love that. And I just found that my joy in life really shows up in the ability to be part of conversations that could potentially shift somebody's thinking, that creates a massive ripple effect, not just in their life, but everyone they're in contact with. That to me is
Oh,
exciting.
okay. And I love hearing that. And I mean, you're an incredible coach, and we've had our moments together. And I know you've coached a lot of people in both our worlds. I'm an agent. I'm trying to figure out the quote unquote hustle, and you know, we're gonna stay there for a second. And that we know there's no magic sauce. There's no formula. You come in, you know, this little thing's not just gonna start ringing for you out of the blue as everyone thinks. You know, you don't get your license, get a BMW and a pin, and off you go. So, you know, talk me through like what you're seeing on your end as you're working with these top producers, and that, you know, we're in this pandemic. What should people be doing? How should they be finding that inner thing inside of them to want to push harder every single day?
Hmm. Yeah, and this is interesting because it's a conversation that's come up a lot recently. Um, and you know, we hear the concept of the big why, right? The reason or purpose in life that you have. And you know, that conversation is amazing. And I also think as a coach, I've noticed the gap of the other side of the coin that never gets talked about. And that's the pain of not being able to live that purpose, the pain of not creating the life that you choose. What does that look like? Because I think at the end of the day, hustle really shows up when you have committed to not being willing to have a life without something, right? Like
Okay.
it's literally like, I am not willing to wake up tomorrow without having this in my world, without having the impact I choose to have, without creating the life I want for my kids, or whatever that is. And I honestly think that, you know, as we learn, right, that we tend to move away from pain versus towards pleasure. I think the constant reminder of that pain that is just hovering there, right? The minute you choose to not wake up on time, the minute you choose to cancel an appointment, the minute you choose to not be at 100% is the minute you choose that pain. And if we
Right.
consistently keep present to that, you know, hustle just becomes who we are, not what we do.
Right. So how do I embrace pain? I mean, it sounds almost counterintuitive, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you know, we were raised to sort of avoid pain, right? Like, hey, don't touch that, or that's hot, or don't run across the road in the middle of the day. Like, we're trained our entire lives to avoid pain, and you're telling me I got to embrace pain. How do I get my mind to be okay with that?
Well, I mean, that's a process, right? Because it's first even recognizing the pain for what it is. I mean, some of us have challenges figuring out what our big why is and putting that into a language that means something to us. And yet it is easier to identify the pain of the things we don't want in life.
Right.
So I think identifying it is the easier route. The challenging part is staying present to it. And, for some of our clients, it's literally a list that sits in front of them every day, so it becomes that decision maker, right? Every time that a distraction shows up, every time that a
Right.
shiny object shows up, every time that a team member is, pulling on us, that list becomes the decision. Do I say yes or no to this? And when you're present to it on a consistent basis, then it becomes a motivator. Because like you said, we're programmed to avoid pain. So it's not like I'm asking you to create a new program. I'm asking you to utilize the program in place in a way that's productive.
Okay. Interesting. Huh. And so how often do you get but I just don't want to do that? I mean, I know we've had that conversation. And what would you say to me, Kel, I just don't want to do this pain. Like it's just not a part of me. What do we do then?
Well, then we have a conversation as to whether or not I'm the right coach for you. Because at the end of the day, I choose to be in conversations with people that are willing to do what it takes to get what they say they want. I refuse to be the coach that constantly hits my head against the wall, because that's not fun for me, and it sure ain't fun for the client. so,
so for everybody listening, I just got fired, right? That's really what
yes.
we're calling it. I just got fired because I wouldn't do what I wanted to do. Now, I mean, that's a great way to look at it. And I think some of our people listening, as they're probably thinking about a few team members they have or people in their world,
Mhm.
what's the pain of not getting out of business with me in a situation like this, or a team member who just isn't showing up? What does that pain look like on the other side?
Oh, well, I mean, here's the thing. In a coaching relationship, especially someone that's looking to grow a team or has a current team, right? I'm the very first role model in that, in regards to what it looks like to hold a standard
Right.
in life. And if that's a standard for me, which I'm sure you can tell it is, and I am willing to not hold that in place, then how can I be in validity with the client when I'm working with them to create standards and hold that line in their own business and in life? So,
Wow.
when that conversation pops up, it is a learning moment for the client, and they can opt in to what they say they
Right.
want to continue, or they can opt out, and that's the same conversation that a leader would have with a team member that's not hitting standards.
Got it. Got it. So really, it just goes back to that first part where we started, where we're talking about values, which now lead to your standards and your expectations, and just
Mhm.
being true to yourself on what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept in your world.
Exactly. Wasn't it Gary Keller that said a standard without a consequence is merely a suggestion?
Yes, yes, it is. A standard without a consequence is merely just a suggestion. I'm going to write that one down again. That's huge. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
Well,
So what's something you've learned in through this pandemic? Obviously you're used to kind of somewhat being in that virtual world, whether it's on Zoom or on the phone. A lot of us aren't. We're used to that in-person interaction. But what's something you've learned over the last 9 or so months that our listeners just have to know or they can implement in their business right away?
oh, wow. Well, I think, when the world got shoved online, even more than it was, there was a lot of learning moments there. And I think also a lot of efficiencies got exposed. I mean, if we take real estate into perspective just in this conversation, I mean, the fact that we can do virtual open houses, right?
Right.
Virtual listing appointments, the amount of time that we have gotten back because of this is incredible. And yet on the other side of it, it also created a challenge because it showed inefficiency in how we spend our time. And a lot of us just, filled it with garbage, right? Because we didn't know what else to do with this extra time.
Right.
So I think, from a learning perspective, it absolutely forced us into looking at efficiencies in our business and in our time. I think it also gives you the ability to really reflect on the return on your time. Because I think as business owners, which everyone in real estate is, that's the one facet of business that I don't think we look at often enough.
Right. And I mean, I love that you call this business owners, and that's probably something that's a little more unique to the KW system versus everywhere else. But shed some light on that. Why should I be thinking of this like a business? I mean, I'm in my third career. I decided I wanted to sell a few houses. I've got this phone that has some numbers. I don't have a database. I don't have anything. Why would I want to think of it as a business? What's the benefit to me there?
Scalability, growth, the ability to actually manage your finances, the ability to actually hit your goals, the ability to measure your results, the ability to attract talent in the future. I mean, everything is around the filter of a business. If you as a real estate agent aren't looking at it that way, then you've intentionally or unintentionally have shoved a lid on the route that you're going and the possibility of what you can create. If you want to be a solopreneur, awesome. But a solopreneur is still a business. It still requires measurement. It still requires systems and models. And if you intend to have any impact in this world, whether it's through your friends, family, kids, wife, whatever that is, then it is your responsibility to put that label on it, because you're doing a disservice to the people around you.
Wow.
I got on my
bold
soapbox
statement. Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like we're getting preached at right now. I love that, and you're right. I mean, I completely agree with you. I've been there, right? I've ridden the roller coaster. I had a fantastic year, rookie year. Came out my second year and pretty well ended up homeless because of it. No systems, no models, not tracking anything, and then got to KW and started implementing that stuff for myself. And all of a sudden, now we had a business. I mean, I think one of the things that as we're continuing to see this pandemic show up, that I think no one's thinking about is the reality that if you treat it like a business, you actually have something you could potentially sell. And most realtors have zero retirement plan. Like they don't know what they're doing. I mean, I saw a realtor the other day. He had to be almost 80. And I'm going, what are you doing? Why are you here? Like you got out with a walker and yet you're still doing real estate. Like, what's the deal? And he said, well, I don't have a retirement. I have nothing. So I'm going to sell a couple houses a year, take my Canadian pension, and that's my life now. And I think if we start realizing that the industry has changed, it's not what it used to be, right? It's no longer being touted as a third job or a second job. It is now a career. Like we have people in school going through it in their early 20s and 18 and 19. And the industry itself is changing, right? So I love that you mentioned the business aspect of it, because in my mind, you have to treat it that way, even if you're going to do 3 or 4 deals a year, because you might have a database down the road that you can sell for $50,000 or $100,000, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why that book, The Golden Handoff, is so amazing, right? Because it brings into a structure as to what that looks like if you ever think about selling your business in the future. And I've even had conversations with lawyers around this, because they're behind this concept, right? Lawyers retire and they just walk away, and a lawyer comes in and takes over. And there's no algorithm or process to understand the value of the database that they've built.
Right.
So in some ways, real estate now is a little farther ahead than other industries with that. And yet I still think it's a conversation that needs to happen more.
I got you. So who are some people that have been, influential to you, and what are sort of some of those things? I know we talked about there being so much that has shaped Kelly into being this rock star coach and leader in the real estate space, but who are you looking up to, and who are those influential people in your world?
You mean outside of you?
Oh, stop
it. Well, here's the first thing that I would say, being intentional around the people that are influencing you. You know, that circle of five, constantly looking at, you know, who are you spending the most time with? And is it a win-win situation? Are you adding value to them just like they're adding value to you? Um, you know, from an influential perspective, I mean, Diana Kokoska, absolutely a massive influencer in my world, and still is. And, you know, John Maxwell is another huge one. You know, I love spending time in the leadership conversation. So of course I'm going to go to,
Absolutely.
you know, the number one person there. So absolute influencer. You as well. I mean,
Thank you.
you know, we have amazing conversations and we constantly push each other, and I love that. And in so many ways, you know, you shift my thinking without realizing it, even though we are, you know, both in the coaching space.
And I love that you said that, because, you know, it's I've taken so much value out of some of our conversations as we talk about that circle of five. I mean, I had this conversation with someone, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and talking about raising that lid and being a better person. This person's a rock star agent, yet for whatever reason they spend a lot of time with people who are not necessarily where they should be. And we just simplified it, and I just said, hey, you want to spend your days having $1 million conversations, or do you want to spend your days having $40,000 a year conversations? Pick one. You can't have both, right? And so if we're a byproduct of the 5 people we surround ourselves with, and we know this to be true, if you look at their salaries and their level of thinking, you're going to be in alignment with them. And so why not choose to be surrounded by people who are where you want to go? If that's, you know, you want to be a millionaire, or you just want to make a few $100,000, whatever that is, and kind of having those conversations around you at all times. And I know it's something I've got to work at, because like you said, Kelly, people's mindsets will shift. Where they are today might not be where they are in a few years. And, you know, if you're not careful, they can actually take you the other way.
Yeah. And don't limit yourself to the industry. I mean, $1 million is $1 million, right? So, you know, that $1 million conversation can happen anywhere. And it's part of the reason, and I know this is going to sound, you know, a little weird, but it's part of the reason why I'm in BNI. It exposes me to so many different industries and access to conversations with people who are, you know, at $1 million, 5 million, 10 million in revenue. And I can have those conversations and learn from them as well. And they can also learn from me because they've never been exposed to the real estate industry and how we have the MREA and all of that, right? So, you know, BNI has been a big part of expanding that network for me, which has been incredible.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And so if you were, you know, looking at it the other way, I know we're getting close to our time today, but if you were looking the other way in, so you're listening to us right now and you're hearing all this incredible stuff. If you were to have a question for you, what would you ask you right now?
Other than my contact details?
Well, we're going to make sure we get those out there. But what do you think someone listening right now may want to know from Kelly, or what's something that you believe that they absolutely have to hear today?
Well, you know, I think the natural initial question is, well, where do I start? Right? What's the first step? Because I know as a society, we always look for that list, that checklist with step 1, step 2, step 3. And I would say the very first step is really just looking at what it is you exactly want. I mean, most of us move through life accepting life. And if there was a place that I was going to start, I would say literally look at where you're accepting life and make a decision as to how you want to move forward. That would be step 1. And based on the areas that you identify, then that'll bring some clarity as to the next step. I will never be a person that'll give you a checklist, because every step of that checklist is going to create a new level of awareness, which might completely shift the journey.
So you mean you're coaching to the whole person? Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
So what does the future look like for Kelly Integrative Coaching Solutions? Like, where are we headed? We're sitting together 5 years from now and we're having a coffee or a drink, and we're celebrating. What are we celebrating for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, we're celebrating the success of my team. I mean, because at the very end of the day, a big part of the organization was to create possibilities for coaches to coach in the space and spend the time that they choose to, whether that's coaching 6 months a year and off 6 months a year.
Right.
There's that at the foremost would be the first celebration that they've hit their goal. And beyond that, we'll be celebrating a book that I've written. We'll be celebrating a TED Talk that I've done. And we'll also be celebrating the fact that 5 years from now, I will be only working 6 months a year as well.
Wow, I love that. Those are some incredible goals, and goes to show your level of thinking, right? I mean, working half a year, you've got to be making a substantial amount of income to be doing that. You've written a book, you've got a TED Talk going on. So that question now comes up where I go, well, how do we keep in touch with Kelly? How do we connect with you? What's the best way for our listeners to find you and to stay in touch with you?
So many different ways because of social media. You can always follow me on Instagram or Facebook, Integrative Coaching Solutions. You can email me directly, Kelly, Kelly, @integrativecoaching.ca. Just keep in mind that my assistant will be the first one to respond to you to set that meeting
So keep it clean, gentlemen, ladies, no swear words in those emails.
But those are the three main ways. And, sometimes I find that people need to figure out more about me before they start a conversation. So go to my Facebook page. I mean, I'm going live every Thursday at 3:00, having a conversation. So that's a great way to learn more about me as a coach and how I think and work. And if it intrigues you and it's in alignment with the goals that you want, then yeah, reach out.
That's incredible. So final question of the day, and this sort of has seemed to become our how we end with most of these conversations. You get to press reset. You get to go back to the start or go back to any point in your career and get to redo some of it. What does the next 90 days look like for you if that were to happen today?
If that were to happen today, oh my goodness. Well, the one thing that I would go back and redo is start the coaching business earlier. Absolutely. And what does the next 90 days look like based on if I was able to do that? Oh my goodness. I would probably completely go back and reshift my initial business plan because I was not thinking big enough when I created it the first time.
Incredible. I love that. Kelly, thank you so much for being on the Real Estate Hustle podcast. We so appreciate you. Guys, if you want to track Kelly down, social media sounds like the best place to do it. And keep an eye out because we've got a book coming, we've got a TED Talk coming, and Kelly's going to be doing a lot of vacationing and hopefully sharing that on social media with us as well. We are the Real Estate Hustle podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. You can email me. You can text me. We're everywhere, so be sure to make sure you follow, click the subscribe button. And again, thank you, Kelly, so much for being with us. We're so appreciative of you.
Thank you.